Okay, members. We now move on to questions to the Minister of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs, and I call Declan McAleer.
Question 1.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I published the Future Agricultural Policy Framework Portfolio for Northern Ireland on the 21st of August 2021. It sets out a framework for future policy around 4 key outcomes, developed following engagement with stakeholders: increasing productivity, environmental sustainability, improved resilience and an effective functioning supply chain. I launched a consultation on the future agricultural policy proposals for Northern Ireland in December 2021, emerging from the already published Future Agriculture Framework Portfolio. This consultation includes policy proposals in 14 work streams, 8 primary work streams and 6 underpinning measures. And I encourage everyone to respond to this consultation and hope that with your support and input we can take full advantage of this opportunity to develop a future sustainable agricultural industry.
Supplementary, Declan McAleer.
I thank the Minister for his response. Minister, in your the policy which you published there just before Christmas, the policy does recognise the underrepresentation of females, particularly at farm leadership level and farming in general, but the policy doesn't outline any schemes or proposals to how to redress this. Will we be seeing any concrete proposals coming forward from the Department to help redress this historical imbalance?
Well, first of all, the scheme is open to everyone, regardless of gender, and I recognise that women contribute greatly to the operation of family farms in Northern Ireland. And in recent years, there has been a significant shift towards more females studying and working in agriculture across Northern Ireland. For example, over half of the higher education students now enrolled in CAFRI are female, which represents a significant and indeed a very welcome shift. And I'm cognizant of the need to encourage females in farming and to eliminating any of the perceived barriers to accessing the industry as a viable career path. And I note that the ERA Committee has undertaken a report on barriers for women in the agriculture sector. I look forward to the views of the committee as to appropriate actions for government of industry itself to encourage female participation in the industry. There is a lot of opportunities, and in particular with the development of the chicken industry and other industries where a lot of it relies on great attention to detail. We're finding that women are excelling in agriculture and want to encourage more of it.
I call Stephen Dunn.
Question 2, Mr. Speaker.
The bovine TB eradication strategy for Northern Ireland aims to reduce and eventually eradicate bovine TB by comprehensively addressing all of the recognised key factors contributing to the maintenance and spread of the disease. The consultation on the Department's proposed implementation and next steps of the bovine tuberculosis eradication strategy for Northern Ireland closed on the 10th of September 2021. This sought views on the increased use of gamma testing, the testing of non-bovines, a preferred option for badger intervention and possible changes to compensation arrangements. Over 3,300 responses were received, highlighting the significant level of interest in the proposals. I'd like to thank everyone who took the time to respond. Since the consultation closed, responses have been analysed by my officials and a summary has been published on my department's website. In addition to considering the consultation responses, my department is also currently progressing the necessary environmental assessments of the proposed new strategy. I expect this work to be completed shortly. I will be in a position to take final decisions on the way forward once the work is concluded, and I have had the opportunity to consider it in detail along with the responses to the consultation, advice provided by my veterinary and policy officials, field evidence from other jurisdictions and the comprehensive business case. I expect to announce these decisions in February.
Stephen Dunn, supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the Minister for his answer on this very important subject impacting many farmers right across Northern Ireland. Given the consultation responses, what is the Department planning to do in relation to the compensation for farmers?
Well, there was a fairly hostile response to the proposals in terms of cutting compensation, and we did seek views on specific questions on proposed compensation cap of £5,000 per bovine, removed for the purpose of disease control, and the proposed phased reduction in compensation payments to 75% of each bovine's market value. I suppose the response that has came back is, well, that would all be very good if we actually had a very low incidence of bovine tuberculosis, and then we could insure our livestock against that. But in the absence of actually achieving that, we don't really want to go there. That's a very quick summary of what the majority of responses were saying. So the real focus that we have to have is on the eradication of bovine tuberculosis. And if people don't think that it's a serious issue, it is. It's costing this Assembly £40-odd million each year to deal with bovine tuberculosis. We have a reservoir of bovine tuberculosis both in the bovine population and indeed in the wildlife population, and we need to eliminate both at the one time if we are to ensure that we can move forward and actually bring this disease down to a much more acceptable level and lead ultimately to the eradication of it here in Northern Ireland, as has happened in other places.
I call Rosemary Barton.
Thank you, Minister, and I noted your reply to Mr Dunn in this supplementary question. Can I just return to that for a moment? Do you not think it's very unfair to the business that has already lost its greatest means of income and still has bills to pay and maybe repayments to the bank to actually annually cut the compensation that they're due?
Well, obviously this is a consultation, and I have outlined the response from industry on that consultation. And you know, we're in the business of putting out consultation because, on the one hand, we have a public purse issue to address. On the other hand, we have an expectation of the industry. I suppose in the last year, we're looking at a herd incidence for the 12 months to November 2021 of 8.93% incidence of bovine tuberculosis. So I'm acutely aware that every bovine TB breakdown has an awful impact on those hard-working families. And, you know, the financial pressures thereafter can be considerable, can be life-changing in many respects. So all of these things will be taken into account in arriving at our final decision.
I call Emma Sheeran.
And Minister, thanks for your answers thus far. I wonder if you would consider, in order to help prevent the spread of TB, establishing a capital grant for farmers that would allow them to implement some enhanced biosecurity measures to prevent the spread of TB.
Well, certainly we're looking at grant aid, and in fact my last meeting was with officials in terms of the capital that has been offered from the Department of Finance, and really how there's no real prospect of us doing what we need to do in reducing the carbon that is actually in the agricultural sector with what has been offered to us by Finance. But if the member has good contacts there, we'd appreciate her support in actually getting more finance to introduce such schemes for biosecurity, and also to make the impact upon carbon reduction that her party would really like to see, but aren't divvying up with the money that they're holding in the Department of Finance to do.
Call John Blair.
Mr Speaker, 481 respondents to the Department's consultation on this strategy disagreed with the DAERA's preferred option for what they call wildlife intervention. What engagement has the Minister undertaken with these stakeholders since the consultation closed, and what consultation is planned if it hasn't taken place already?
Well, there was environmental and conservation bodies submitted 10 responses. There were 3 responses from veterinary bodies, 16 from individual vets. Of the remaining responses, 1 came from political parties, 6 from individual politicians, 15 from representatives of non-bovine interests, and then there was other individuals. So it was a huge response in that there were 3,300 responses, and obviously I can't meet every single respondent, but we are receiving correspondence from people which we're dealing with, and my door is always open where I can to meet groups or bodies that act on behalf of people. So I've engaged quite extensively, for example, with one of the bodies, Ulster Wildlife Trust, over the course of the last year, and we've discussed badger, the badger issue quite extensively with them. And I'm very happy to continue meeting groups which have a relevant case to make that isn't an issue.
And I call Robbie Butler.
Number 3.
Mr Speaker, with your permission, I wish to group questions 3, 9, 11 and 14 together. The avian influenza outbreak across the United Kingdom has been going on for 83 days now since the first confirmation in Worcestershire on the 26th of October 2021. In total now there have been 81 cases of avian influenza confirmed across the UK. The breakdown is as follows: 68 cases in England, 5 in Scotland, 3 in Wales and 5 in Northern Ireland. The 5 confirmed cases in Northern Ireland were located at Auckland, Brooksane, Armagh, Coke and Ballinderry. Culling, disposal and preliminary cleansing and disinfection has been completed at all sites. As of today, there is one 10-kilometre surveillance zone still in place around the Ballinderry premises. This is due to be lifted on the 22nd of January. All other disease control zones enacted around the other 4 affected premises have been lifted. In the Republic of Ireland, avian influenza has been confirmed at 6 premises. The disease control zones for 4 of these cases extended into Northern Ireland, and corresponding disease control zones were established here to limit the onward spread of disease. As of today, only one of these disease control zones, which extended into parts of County Tyrone and County Armagh, are still in place. The confirmation of H5N1 in Northern Ireland has a notable impact on our poultry industry, international trade and the wider economy. Poultry meat from the 3-kilometre restriction zone around an infected premises is excluded from the EU trade, and this poultry meat must be used in the domestic market only. And international trade is a reserved matter. My officials are working closely on a daily basis with DEFRA, market access colleagues, to ensure trade with third countries is maintained where possible and to minimise the impact on Great Britain and Northern Ireland. An avian influenza protection zone has been in place across Northern Ireland since November 17, 2021. The measures in the avian influenza protection zone include stringent mandatory biosecurity measures to help prevent the spread of disease from wild birds or another source to poultry. In addition, the introduction of mandatory housing orders effective from the 29th of November 2021 legally requires all birds to be housed or otherwise kept separate from wild birds, and similar measures including housing orders are also in place across Great Britain. My officials will continue to meet frequently with industry stakeholders to engage closely in regards to this outbreak.
Robbie Butler, supplementary.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Thank the Minister for his answer. I understand that there have been no outbreaks of avian influenza since late December. Can you confirm that? And when would you expect to make an announcement on the release of free-range flocks to the outdoors again, conditional that there would be no more outbreaks of avian flu?
I can confirm that there hasn't been any outbreaks since December, and that's something which is very welcome. And what we want to do is ensure that whatever steps that we take are appropriate, and will ensure that we do nothing to contribute to the further spread of this awful disease. The housing order will be kept under constant review. The decision to ease any restrictions will be determined by the level of risk in conjunction with the industry and in collaboration with our counterparts in Great Britain and the Republic of Ireland.
Pat Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thank you, Minister. Minister, I was wondering what strategies do you have, or your department have, to put in place to prevent high risks of infection of avian flu among commercial bird populations over the next 10 years?
Well, we have a superb set of veterinary officials looking after this, who carry out incredible work in terms of keeping this under control. And we're also working with people in the industry, the poultry industry, who are at the leading edge in terms of anywhere in these islands. And therefore we are quite well placed. We do have a high volume of poultry per square mile of population, and therefore it's more challenging for us. But it also needs us to ensure that we meet that challenge. And the best means of meeting that challenge is by the best biosecurity measures possible, because we can never stop wild birds bringing a disease in, because the birds are migratory and they will travel to here, and they're very welcome. But unfortunately, some of them will carry disease. And therefore, the only way of actually ensuring that disease doesn't become a problem is that you keep the disease outside of your premises. and therefore taking the appropriate biosecurity measures, which are extremely stringent, but that our people have advised on, our veterinary officials have advised on, is critically important. And that also applies to small flocks where people are keeping birds for a hobby. They also need to apply those biosecurity measures. I welcome the fact that there's around 600 people come onto a webinar to hear what they needed to do. We did lose a flock, which was a hobby flock to it, but it is a demonstration that this isn't just about commercial poultry, it's about all poultry across Northern Ireland, and everyone should be registered for the poultry they keep.
I call John Stewart.
Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his answers so far. It actually follows on from that point you just made. I'm a proud owner of a rooster called Mr. Onions and 5 hens, and we'll not go into their names at this stage. But I'm just wondering what more precautions and measures people like myself and the many thousands of other backyard poultry owners should take in terms of preventing the spread of avian flu. I know you've commented on one. Apart from getting registered, is there more that we can be doing?
Oh, absolutely. Avoiding contact with other birds, ensuring that there is no contact with the faeces from other birds, ensuring that vermin, for example, cannot easily access your property, which is always attractive to them because there's always food there for the vermin, and ensuring that you're wearing clothing which can be properly washed whenever you go in and out of your birdhouse and so forth. So there is advice on the Department's website, and I would encourage the member, or indeed any other member of the public, to look at that if they are keepers of birds, to help ensure that they can keep this disease at bay.
Oh, William Irwin.
Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Minister for his response. After speaking to the owner of the Ama outbreak, the farmer was very appreciative of the Department's response and help and advice. In relation to the outbreaks, they're some distance apart. Has your department been able to identify the source of the spread?
Yes, there's been a considerable amount of work done on that, and there has been factors which would link a number of the outbreaks, and ongoing discussions are being had with the owners in that respect, and that's something which we're not in a position to publish at this moment in time, but will be at some point. But in respect of this, it's not just, particularly for the commercial holders, it's not just what you do, because you can take all of the biosecurity measures, but someone else can cause a problem. So it's the mealman who's delivering the meal, it's the electrician, it's the plumber who are coming in to do maintenance on the house, and indeed, as I mentioned, the issue about rodents, ensuring that your house is rodent-proof, and you've taken all of the steps. These are all key measures that need to happen, and for a lot of people, this is their bread and butter, this is their livelihood, so they need to protect that livelihood and ensure that nobody else jeopardises it on their behalf.
Oh, Colin Gillernew.
And thank the Minister for his answers. The Minister knows that there's a large and a very valuable poultry industry in my constituency, and it's a worrying time. Minister, and you have mentioned some of the mitigations that are being taken there. Are there any further mitigations that you can advise the House, and also to dealing with the impact of avian flu? And do these include trade restrictions or controls?
Well, I did mention that those areas where we had to put the zones cause trade restrictions, and that causes harm to the industry. And therefore, keeping this disease out is of critical importance. Good disinfection is also important. So ensuring that vehicles go through disinfectant pools that have been created is another benefit. And for individuals, just ensuring that as they enter and leave houses, that they don't take the boots outside, inside. They have different boots for inside the house. That the outside of the house is always kept, the concrete area is always kept well washed and so forth. That there's no grain lies around the meal bins. These are all practical measures which the industry knows very well, and they need to ensure that they implement it 100% of the time. Because the only way that this infection is going to get into your house is if you allow it to come into your house, and therefore a lot of it is in the hands of the people who are actually looking after the flocks.
They call Mervyn Story.
Number 4, Mr. Speaker.
The private member's climate change bill will have a very significant and detrimental impact on farmers across Northern Ireland, including in North Antrim. The UK Climate Change Committee have indicated that even a 50% reduction in meat and dairy production in Northern Ireland would not get Northern Ireland to net zero by 2050, never mind by 2045. The Climate Change Committee have further highlighted in the strongest possible terms that a net zero target by 2050 or earlier for Northern Ireland is not credible, is morally wrong and could actually undermine the efforts to reduce emissions. It could also result in a shift of food production from Northern Ireland to other countries with a carbon footprint. Such production is much higher and therefore actually increase global emissions. KPMG also recently published a report on the economic impact assessment of the private member's climate change bill, which reaffirms the evidence presented by the Climate Change Committee and predicts that sector-level herd numbers would significantly fall, with the greatest impact being felt in farms operating in less favoured areas. Overall, the report concludes the impact being beef, dairy and sheep herd numbers falling by 86% and pig and poultry herd numbers falling by 11%, which would represent a 54% decrease in farm employment, with around 13,000 jobs lost in the primary area alone. Instead of imposing a target that is not credible, we need to ensure we work collaboratively with the agri-food sector to achieve reductions in emissions through a balanced approach. The private member's bill could disengage the very people who are part of the solution to this issue, our farmers, and we must get full buy-in and face this challenge collectively.
Mervyn Story, supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I place on record my appreciation to the farmers in North Antrim and across Northern Ireland for the work that they do, and particularly also condemn the attack in a rural constituency and really did have an impact on our farming community yesterday in Lough Gill. But can the Minister give some light in terms of the comments of the TD in the Irish Republic, the spokesperson for Sinn Féin, who quite clearly speaks with a different tongue than his colleagues in this House, because he has clearly made it very, very plain that there is a serious lack of trust in the Green Party to deliver for either the environment or the rural communities in terms of the bill in that House. Will the Minister recognise that to ensure the future of farming, that the climate change bill cannot proceed on the basis that it is currently framed?
Well, this is something which has been debated considerably for quite a period of time, and we have asked over and over and over again for the evidence of how this can be achieved without having the damaging impact upon the agricultural sector that the KPMG report has pointed out. Indeed, that the Climate Change Committee, who are world-renowned experts on the issue, have indicated it's going to have. But people just make bland statements without any factual, scientific backing for those statements. And I suppose in truth, and the member serves a constituency where there is a large, less favoured area, and the figure that I just quoted to the Assembly on the impact that it would have on the less favoured area farms is incredible. We're looking at the beef, dairy and sheep herd numbers falling by 86%, and the biggest impact actually happening in the less favoured areas. So essentially, we have a party, like I understand where the Green Party's come from, but it's largely a Belfast-based party. It doesn't get that many votes from the agricultural sector. But we have a party which is in behind the Green Party on this particular issue, Sinn Féin, who are saying one thing in the south of Ireland and a different thing here in Northern Ireland. And they are abandoning the farmers who are living in the hills and the uplands of Northern Ireland. They are abandoning those farmers, and I would call on Sinn Féin to reflect on what they're doing, on the damage that they're potentially doing to the agricultural industry by their backing of something which has no scientific grounds to back.
I call Philip McGuigan.
Can Collier, and I've no doubt the Minister knows fine well that the private member's bill has the support of all the parties in here, with the exception of the DUP, and that across this island Sinn Féin speak on one voice. The Minister will no doubt remember the extreme snowfall in the spring of 2013 that resulted in the north, but particularly in my own constituency of North Antrim, being covered in snow with drifts as high as 10 feet. This snowfall resulted in the death of 17,098 sheep and goats, as well as 535 cattle, as well as much structural damage to many farms, and costed the Executive $5 million in compensation. Would the Minister agree that robust and ambitious legislation to address climate change and extreme weather events that may happen here in the north in the future is essential to protect the future of agriculture and all other sections of society in the north?
I recall that particular snow experience. I don't recall the one that took place. I think it was in 1961 that my mother and father talked about, but where they were locked in for 3 weeks in their own homes. So major snow events have taken place for very many decades, occasionally, and thankfully this year we've avoided it thus far. Also, he talks about the death of 17,000 sheep. What Sinn Féin are actually standing over here is the death of 13,000 farms, and the people who actually work on those farms not being able to get a living in those farms. And the fact of life is that my constituent farmers will feel it considerably less than the constituent farms for the member who's just spoken in North Antrim, because there's many more farms in the less favoured area, and those are the people who he is hurting most. And Sinn Féin are in a different place from the other parties, because the other parties backed my proposals at the committee last week. Sinn Féin stood alone with the Green Party on this issue, and they're standing alone against the farming community with the Green Party on this issue now.
Call Jim Master.
Is the Minister aware that shortly before Christmas, local farmers in North Antrim in the Lochgiel area invited MLAs to meet with them to discuss this issue, and that Mr McGuigan, who styles himself as a co-sponsor of the Green Bill, didn't trouble himself to attend? If he had, he would have been asked this question by one of the farmers: would you rather that your constituents buy high-quality North Antrim meat, or meat produced from the cleared Amazon basin? What's the Minister's view about that?
I think, first of all, whenever politicians run away from their constituents is never a good sign, and the fact that I would probably be more welcome amongst the farmers in Lochgiel than Mr McGuigan. In fact, possibly Mr Alistair might even be more welcome than Mr McGuigan amongst the farming community in Lochgiel speaks volumes. But I did visit a farm in North Antrim with Mr Story just last week, and that farm has been engaged in doing work on carbon. And that farm is able to demonstrate that the carbon that is involved in the production of the beef in that farm is 1/4 of the carbon that is produced in both North America and South America on the big farms that are over there. But we have a policy, we're driving ahead with this policy because we think it's populist, or some people think it's populist. And they're driving ahead with this policy, which will actually lead to more environmental damage. More environmental damage. But the issue of actually thinking this is popular and trendy with a particular voter base will go after it irrespective of the consequences is the approach being adopted by both the Green Party and indeed Sinn Féin.
Pastor McLone, a very brief question and response from the Minister, please.
Will the Minister accept that whichever climate change bill is enacted in law, that will involve significant change and significant impact, not only just on agriculture, but on agri-food, on the economy widely, indeed on communities? So, as part of that, can the Minister give us some sort of insight as to what sort of just transition measures are being talked about that will be put in place, and if those will be done on a cross-departmental basis?
And in terms of a just transition, our green growth policy is about taking actions, meaningful actions. And we had requested It's a substantial amount of money. I have to say the Department of Finance has fallen pitifully short of what is actually needed. So we can remove carbon, whether it be through anaerobic digestion, in terms of the food intake of animals, whether it be through the genetics and breeding, which will ensure that we can actually produce less carbon. And what we have identified very, very clearly is the more efficient farming is, the lower its carbon footprint. So we have proposals that are there, and we have proposals that have been put to the Department of Finance to financially support this. The Department of Finance needs to put its money where Sinn Féin's mouth is. They aren't supporting us to deliver 82%, never mind 100%, with the pitiful offer that has been made to us to tackle climate change.
And that ends the period for listed questions. Members, we now move on to 15 minutes of topical questions. Question 1 has been withdrawn, and I now call Harry Harvey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Minister, and I thank you for your answers thus far. Could I ask you, Minister, to highlight your thoughts on how nutrient management on farms could be used to create energy, including biomethane? Thank you.
It's a tremendous opportunity, and we already have quite a number of farms who are producing biomethane. That is currently being translated into electricity. We can go a step further, and that will involve significant investment. So I know of one company that invested $1.4 million in cleaning that up, so it can be used as a fuel. And that's the nature of the costs that are involved. So turning this gas, which was once slurry, you remove the methane from the atmosphere, and then you replace a fossil fuel with the biomethane to run your vehicles, to run your refrigeration, to run your tractors, and to heat people's homes. So there's a win-win in this. It requires investment. There will be a lot of investment that will come from the private sector, but we need to back that up and be able to help the private sector to deliver this quickly, because it will happen much more slowly than by 2050 if we don't give them that support, and therefore the necessity to get good capital support from the Department of Finance to deliver on this is critical.
Harry Harvey, supplementary.
Okay, thank you. Minister, given the impact of COVID on our supply chains, and in particular food production and the energy crisis that faces Northern Ireland citizens, does this once again not highlight the important role farmers play in our society?
Well, I think going forward, food from Northern Ireland has demonstrated over and over and over again its quality, its provenance, its traceability. And we can demonstrate, and we can actually, with investment, ensure that we have the highest environmental standards anywhere in the world as well. Therefore, it is incumbent upon us to ensure that investment can take place, and that we can say to people, if you wish to buy food from South America, from North America, from Australia, wherever it happens to be, you are not buying the best quality food in terms of all of those issues, in terms of provenance, food quality, animal welfare, animal health, traceability, and importantly, the environment and air miles and food miles. And we can meet all of those requirements and supply to a local market, which is largely within a few hours from Northern Ireland. We can do that extremely well.
I call Keith Buchanan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minister, could you provide the House and myself an update on the Farm Business Improvement Scheme, please?
Yeah, thank the member for the question. And the Farm Business Improvement Scheme has been a huge success story thus far. I welcome the commitment of substantial investment in our largest manufacturing sector and the confidence it gives in the sector. But what we want to ensure in terms of it is that the investments that are made are meaningful investments that will deliver for everything that is needed. So, for example, the investment in the low-emission spreading equipment and covering of tanks, etc., that will achieve somewhere in the region of a 25% reduction in the amount of ammonia. Now, for a number of years, we have been sitting with SAS, for example, saying you can't build anything, but they haven't reduced the amount of ammonia in the atmosphere by 1%, because just stopping and going into paralysis doesn't achieve anything. So investing in measures such as the one that we have with the low emission spreading equipment has made a real transformational difference. And importantly, in the year that is, with the price of fertiliser associated with the high oil prices, has helped ensure that farms will actually need to acquire less fertiliser because they will extract more from their slurry. And therefore, there is a significant benefit both to the environment and indeed to the farmer in such an investment.
Supplementary, Keith Buchanan.
Your response so far, Minister. Obviously, this financial input is very welcome, and welcome to where I live and part of my constituency, and most of it is actually rural. The question I have for you, at a recent UFU event several weeks ago, I think most of the parties here were represented at that, and they took, to be fair, time to go to that and explain to farmers. But many farmers are lacking confidence and concerned that on one hand, you're giving financial support out to buy equipment, which is good and needed, but there's a sense of we don't know where we're going, and this climate change, this private member's climate bill is affecting their business, their mental health, and they don't know where their business is going. What would you say to those farmers, Minister?
Well, I tend to agree, because it doesn't matter what sector it is, you need some certainty going forward. And if you want to make investments, and particularly if that investment involves borrowed money, you absolutely want some certainty that somebody's not going to pull the rug from under you 2 or 3 years into the scheme. So we need to ensure that we can move forward in this House in a way which actually tackles the environmental issues and the environmental problems. That is absolutely critical, that we do that we take those environmental issues head on. But so often there are lots of opportunities out there to actually turn those problems into an advantage. And that's what we need to be doing here in Northern Ireland. Instead of just closing down an industry, we should be looking at how do we deal with the problems that are emanating from that industry and turn those problems into an advantage. And that's why I talk about issues like the anaerobic digestion. We can engage in restoring peatlands, and we can engage in tree planting, we can engage in hedgerow enhancement and different grass management, which will use multi-sward species and so forth. All of these things will help us to reduce our carbon footprint, but still allow us to produce high-quality food here in Northern Ireland. And that's what's critical going forward. I don't really want to be buying food from the Southern Hemisphere in years to come, and I don't really want to be eating plant-based food which has been produced from insects. I'd much rather a steak.
Call Deborah Erskine.
The Minister will be aware of the importance of protecting wildlife in a beautiful constituency such as Fermanagh and South Tyrone. Therefore, what engagement has the Minister had with councils to promote and enhance better biodiversity across Northern Ireland?
Well, biodiversity is absolutely critical, and people talk an awful lot about carbon, but miss the issue about biodiversity. And there has been a lot of species loss over the course of the last number of decades, and that's something that we need to arrest and reverse. And certainly some of the work that we're doing on biodiversity with RSPB has ensured that we have more ground nesting birds. And I visited Fermanagh, County Fermanagh, and was out on the lochs on the islands where that work has been done, and it has been good quality work. It actually involved removing trees in some instances so that predatory birds wouldn't be coming and taking the eggs of the ground nesting birds, and some people were objecting, but they didn't understand the importance of the project and the ability to contribute to biodiversity that was taking place in your county. But there are so many opportunities that exist there, and in some respects our future agricultural policy, enhancing what we're doing with our hedgerows, creating more wildlife zones, planting more trees, restoring more peatlands, all of these things will help with biodiversity. And it's important that we do work in conjunction with our local councils and authorities to ensure that that support comes from as wide an area as possible. I should say that some of the councils have put forward really powerful proposals on tree planting, and I would hope that maybe some others would maybe step up to the plate a bit more and ensure that they're taking the steps to ensure that we have much greater afforestation across this little country than we currently have.
Deborah Erskine, supplementary.
And I thank the Minister for his answer. Could the Minister also detail what engagement he may have had with the Department for Communities to promote biodiversity in some of their green spaces? For example, Don't Grow, Let It Mow and wildflower meadows and housing estates, for example?
Very importantly, we launched a pollinator scheme, and that pollinator scheme was taken up largely by community organisations. So it could have been sports clubs, for example, the GAA, it could have been local community associations, but there was a wide range of community organisations which embraced the pollinator schemes, and as a consequence of that, we actually, I think, doubled the amount of money that we had initially set aside. So we're spending well over £1 million on the pollinator scheme because of the success of its uptake. I just want to say that the pollinators are incredibly important to us going forward, and therefore having schemes which will help ensure that there is great areas for the pollinators to actually thrive, dotted right across Northern Ireland, will be something which will translate into real significant, meaningful benefits, which will be evidenced in the years to come.
I call John Stewart.
Mr Speaker, Minister, the proposed increase in the plastic bag levy from 5 pence to 20 pence, can you confirm if this will apply to meat packaging, and if so, what impact that will have potentially on food hygiene and on the end consumer?
Previously it hasn't applied to meat packaging because of the potential for perhaps blood to run from the meat into other foods and cause harm to the other foods, and that it hasn't been kept right. So all of these things will be looked at in terms of ensuring that the public health issue is not ignored. So the levy is there, and you know, I wish that people don't spend very much per household on the levy. I wish that this levy leads to a massive reduction in the use of bags. We've already seen a massive reduction that has taken place thus far. That has stalled. I hope that this will give it the kickstart to see another significant reduction in the use of these bags, and consequently having a better environment to live in.
Supplementary, John Stewart.
Thanks for that, Minister. Yeah, I do agree. It's undoubtedly had an impact, and some suggest potentially up to 90% of plastic bags have been reduced as a result of that. I'm just wondering if you have a grasp of how much more of an impact the increase from 5 pence to 20 pence will make on plastic bag usage going forward, and also if you believe that we could use that money then to educate our young people through environmental schemes and such like, and what other aspects you see that additional funding going towards to educate people.
As far the plastic bag levy contributes and has been contributing roughly, up to and over £5 million a year. It has reduced over the years because the number of bags has reduced, which is a positive thing. I would anticipate that there will be an uplift, because I don't think that the reduction immediately will be reflecting the uplift in the levy, and therefore we will have more to offer. But that will go to organisations which are dedicated to making environmental improvements, and every year we give out significant amounts of money to organisations who do real good, and these are for practical steps, not for lobbying work, but for practical steps to ensure that they can make the environment a better place. And I appreciate the work and support of all of the environmental NGOs in assisting us to improve the environment that we live in.
Kelly Armstrong, brief question and brief response from the Minister, please also. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Minister, in discussions with DAERA officials over the environment strategy, what consideration did you give, if any, to the introduction of a bespoke agriculture bill for Northern Ireland?
Obviously, we didn't have time to introduce a bespoke agricultural bill in this mandate, but it will be for a future mandate and a future minister to make that decision going forward. But obviously, the future agricultural policies that we're proposing for support measures are very much bespoke, and leaving the European Union has given us the opportunity to have a much more flexible, nimble approach to this.
And the time is up. Members, please take your ease for a moment or two. Thank you.